Right, after the circus act, ladies and gentlemen, I think we'll see if we can get underway. Apologies for the, nearly 10 minutes delay. Well, good evening to you. My name's Councillor White, John White. I'm chairman this evening, and on my left I have my vice chairman, Councillor Heaney. The other councillors who are members of the committee are sitting on the tables either side. They are the ones who will debate and ultimately vote on each of the applications in front of us tonight. On my immediate left and right are the TDC officers, including Head of Planning and the committee solicitor. This is a formal committee, and it's important that the councillors can hear all of the presentations and the debate, and therefore I would respectfully ask that you do remain quiet during the debate. The order of business tonight for the planning applications will be as usual. Firstly, the officers will give a presentation. Then we shall have any public speaking, any further comment from the officer, and the committee members then ask questions, debate and finally vote. And there is an additional item tonight, item A9 on your agenda. This is planning application 1801-281 to do with land at the junction of Heath Road and Parsonage Lane, Tendring. Following the site visit this morning, we found that there were several slight problems with the drawings, and therefore we have deferred that application, and it will be taken at next month's meeting. So that's agenda item 9. It's on page 73 on your agenda. Now, finally, I should add that this meeting is being recorded by the council and will be available on the council website in approximately 10 days' time. So we go to the agenda, and I think we have a full house, so we don't have any apologies for absence. To the minutes then of the last meeting, that was the 18th of September, and I ask if they are a true and correct record or if there are any errors or omissions. Yeah. I have a proposer and a seconder. Those in favour then that I sign them. Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. Any councillors who have a disclosable pecuniary interest on any item that's on the agenda? There apparently are none. Item 4, questions on pursuance, notice pursuance. I have not received any questions. And that takes us then straight away on to application A1, which is found on page 11 of your agenda. It is application 17/01988 full. It's to do with land at the east of Kirby Road, Great Holland, and it's for the construction of 44 dwellings. So I turn to Mr. Noice, I think.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this an application, as the Chairman said, in the direction of 41 dwellings. 41 dwellings for use by residents over 55 years old, including a mix of 1- and 2-bed apartments and 2-bed dwelling houses with associated car parking and landscaping. I think as members picked up, paragraph 1.5 of your report referred to an outline application. Of course, it is a full planning application that's for determination this evening. Again, you'll have seen the site on your site visit this morning. The site's located next door to a new care home that's just been erected and under the same site ownership. You'll have noted there's an existing access route into the site which has already been constructed, and then a new spur which will link through to this application site off the existing access. The cemetery is located immediately to the west of the site, and there's the railway line immediately to the north. and there's a small pumping station immediately to the northwest of the site, as shown. So that's the site itself. Again, you'll have picked up from the report, it was a former gasworks, I believe. So technically it's a brownfield site. It is now allocated within the emerging local plan, or it's within the settlement boundary for the emerging local plan, where normally new development would be considered acceptable, but remains outside the settlement boundary in the adopted local plan. Again, you get a good view of the new care home, which has recently been completed immediately to the east of the site. That's a view looking again across the site entrance towards what's recently been constructed. I think you get a good impression of what's been built on the site in terms of the variation in roof heights and different types of materials that were used in the construction of the care home, which I think in this location gives a reasonably attractive visual appearance. There's a mix of boarding, render and brickwork with different types of roof covering as well. And that gives perhaps a slightly better view. Then once you move into the site itself, that's the view across the actual current application site. There is a bund, again, to the north of the site where it adjoins the railway line. You may also have picked up there's an existing bus stop immediately outside the site, again on the western site boundary and immediately opposite to the cemetery entrance. So that's the proposed scheme. It's a mix of single-storey, two-storey dwellings, and an apartment block to the north of the site. Again, as I mentioned, there's a spur road leading into the site itself, providing a significant amount of car parking. There are 50 car parking spaces in total. The properties to the site frontage will be 1.5 storey in height, but the remainder, there's a couple of 1.5 stories within the central part of this group, but the remainder of the central group will be single-storey units, the 2-storey or 1.5 storey to the southwest corner. You'll just pick up the edge of the existing care home to the east. Just looking at more detail, again, I think the applicants have submitted fairly well-designed dwellings, again incorporating a range of materials. So again, this is typical of the 1.5 storey dwellings. You've got render, boarding, brickwork, and that sort of follows through really throughout the design of the scheme. I'll just quickly take you through the different elements. So again, it's very much using traditional design and traditional materials. As I mentioned, it's got the single-storey dwellings within the central part of the site. And just come to the end of that. We'll come to the apartment blocks in a minute. This is just the elevations of the proposed garaging. So again, fairly sort of traditional rural in character. So that's the proposed apartment block. This will be 2.5 stories in height. Again, to a certain extent, mirroring the height of the adjoining care home. Again, it's a different use of materials. You have boarding on sort of one elevation, brickwork, a mix of different styles. So again, I think in terms of design, quite an interesting building. That's just the side elevations. In terms of accommodation, as mentioned, it is aimed at the over 55s or the retired market. You have a communal area within part of the ground floor. You have 2 entrances into the site to the north, from the north and the south. There's a lift facility as well within the building. And as you'll see, there's a mix of different sized flats within the scheme. That's just the first floor, and then the second floor. I think members would ask the question on site about a question of refuse. There is a building immediately adjoining the apartment block. I'll go back to the site plan later. But there is a specific building for waste storage for the apartment block. The remainder of the dwellings will have their own individual on-site provision, and their waste will be collected from their door openings, or from the entrance to their property. If I can show you on here. So that building there will be the cycle and waste bin storage for the apartment block. As I mentioned, there'd be provision for waste storage, within the main dwellings, with collection picked up from the front of each of the dwellings. So that's just looking at the different types of materials that will be used. You have a mix again of render, brick, and cladding, which is mixed throughout the site. And again, this shows the different levels within the site as well. So you have predominantly a single story within the central part, 1.5 story to the site frontage, and obviously 2.5 story for the apartment block. This just again gives a description of the proposed boundary treatments. Along this frontage, as an example, you have a brick wall detail, which we'll look at in a minute. It is proposed to replant the hedging to the site frontage at this point here, and there are other places within the development which also incorporate hedging. To the southern boundary will be a 1.5 metre post and rail fence, again with planting along that quite exposed boundary. And that just gives an example of the type of treatments we're looking at. So that's what you'll see on the southern boundary. Again, we'd expect, that's the post and rail fence, and they'll obviously be planting alongside that. Then, again, within the site itself, this represents the entrances to some of the single-storey and two-storey detached properties. So this just identifies the private garden areas. You'll notice the amenity space provided for the apartment block. We're satisfied that it does meet the required standards for amenity space. As you'll note, each property has its own dedicated garden area, and then there's an area of more amenity space to the southeast corner of the site. And this one just demonstrates where the actual parking will go. All the single-storey and 1.5-storey dwellings will have their own dedicated parking areas. Then there'll be, again, parking provided for the apartment blocks. And that just is a bit more detail about the landscape detail. Again, as I mentioned, we'd be looking for a firm belt of planting to the southern boundary, which is being provided. Additional planting is being provided to the north of the site. And as I mentioned, again, there'll be hedging provided on the western boundary. Chairman, I think that's probably the presentation, so the recommendation is to approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, public speaking. Mr. Peter Jeffrey here. Welcome, sir, if you'd like to come forward. And get your microphone on and get settled, sir, and you have 3 minutes then to tell us the good points about the application.
Good evening, Chair and members, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak this evening. I appreciate that time is at a premium, so I'll endeavour to keep my comments brief.
Could your microphone, I think, has skipped out. That's it.
Are we on?
Thank you
Shall
very
I start
much.
again? Is that all right?
That's it.
So, good evening, Chair and members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I appreciate that time is at a premium, so I'll endeavour to keep my comments brief. The subject parcel of land comprises a previously developed site within a sustainable location, which is both close to local transport infrastructure and also within the defined settlement boundary of Kirby Cross within the emerging local plan. My client and our project team have worked extensively with officers at Tendring District Council and with other statutory consultees, covering a spectrum of issues including height, massing, density, car parking, amenity space, highways, ecology, contamination and more. The culmination of all of these extensive discussions is that we are absolutely confident that the proposed scheme will provide optimal residential accommodation both for the existing residents in the area and for the future residents of the proposed scheme. Furthermore, I would like to re-emphasise that the proposed scheme will provide specialist accommodation for over 55s and would also make a generous allocation for affordable housing, which has been negotiated with the Council's appointed financial viability officer, consultant. Therefore, we are absolutely confident that the proposed scheme will deliver the right homes of the right sizes, of the right affordable tenures, the right mix, and of the requisite quality to address the acute housing shortages in the district and beyond. I would therefore respectfully appeal to the committee to approve the application in accordance with the submitted plans, and would welcome any questions that you may have. Thank you again, Chair and members.
Thank you very much, sir. Don't think Mr. Noice will want to add anything to that. In that case, members, it's entirely up to your good selves now. We all visited the site this morning, and I think saw all the points that we would have raised, so who's going to open the batting? Right, yes, Councillor Beds.
Mr. Chairman, is it possible, Mr. Minister, to have a look back at was there one about the proposed... Oh, my microphone's not on either. Right, is it possible to have a look at the proposed elevations in full, so we can see where the spacing between the houses, please? And what I'm trying to find out is what side access there is to gardens for residents to be able to get their bins from the back of the houses through to the front, because I can't see any access points.
Chairman, I think the best I can do is show the block plan. We don't actually have a street scene view as such, so certainly there is a plan certainly supplied in terms of the waste management, which clearly showed there would be a route from the back of the properties to take the bins through to the front, so that would be expected to be provided. I mean, if you've got concerns about that, we could put an additional condition on this, stating that, you know, waste bin routes to be agreed, or waste bin provision to be agreed prior to commencement of development. There is some information provided with the detail, but I agree it's not clear exactly how you get the bin from the back garden to the front. There's certainly plenty of space within the site for provision of bin storage. That's not an issue, and certainly the plan I've seen clearly shows the waste bins being collected at the front of the site. So I don't think collection is an issue. It's where they'd be stored. And certainly from what it's shown on the plan I've seen, it would be to the rear of the properties. But it's not entirely clear how it gets from back to front, and I agree with that. So I think we could put that on as a condition, saying that detail to be provided.
Yes?
Thank you very much. And the other question I have, I've got a few more questions, but just one I'll ask now, is about parking. Because I know there are 50 parking spaces for 41 dwellings. Some of the houses are going to have 1 or 2 parking spaces. There are only 2 visitor spaces, and although it's for over 55s are often in couples and have 2 people driving. So if there's only 1 parking space and only 2 visitor spaces, I'm at a loss to see where visitors or an extra family car would be situated, because there's no parking in that road. It's very congested.
Yeah, Chairman, I do take that point. I think obviously it's been before the Highway Authority have not raised objection to the amount of parking being provided, but I do take the point about there are only 2 parking spaces. I agree, that's true. I think on a scheme of this nature, you'd expect there to be less chance of there being 2 cars per household, shall we say. It's more likely to be 1 car per household, I would think. And certainly I'm sure that's the way the Highway Authority have looked at this. Certainly based on their standards, they've not raised objection to this.
Yes.
Thank you. I mean, I know at my age, I know lots of husband and wife families that have a car each. So I can't see that this would be any different if it's, you know, that often, I don't think one space is enough per house if it's a house that 2 people over 55 are going to live. You can't assume that there would only be 1 car there. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Heaney.
What I'm concerned is... Oh, sorry, turn my thing on. What I'm concerned is that the... Oh, dear, stay. That block of flats up there is 3-storey. The care home is 2-storey. The block of flats has got to be 17... So they say it's got to be 15 metres away from the pumping station. They say it's 17 metres away from the pumping station. It's nearly on top of the care home, which we can't see here, and there's going to be east windows down there looking out into the care home. It's going to be very close to the care home. We don't know anything. We haven't got a slide to say how actually close it is. The other time, what else have I saw? Part of the amenity space is the bund, all that bit at the top, which nobody can use. They can't climb up all there. It's a small amount of amenity space. Also, it's terribly difficult. I say they've got trees on the bund. Well, trees go very badly on the bunds. You've only got to look at the one brown whitings in Elston Market, which is the most pathetic thing you've ever seen in your life. The bund actually is useless because the trains were above it, because we saw one going past today. I just think this is overdeveloped, actually. And it's quite a long way for people. Some old people will be living in that flat, over 55. They've got to come out of their flat, carrying their black bags, go down the lift, clump through the car park to put their rubbish in the bin. I mean, a lot of these places have rubbish sort of in the buildings. And I think I don't want to personalise everything, but there might be somebody on 2 crutches. I mean, I can't stagger along even now with my rubbish bin. It's not easy. So I'm not... And I think this is overdevelopment too. Thank you.
Right. Further spaces? Further... Yes, Councillor Baker.
Chairman, it's a comment really rather than anything else. With regard to NHS England and the one line that says they confirm they do not intend to seek 106 mitigation against his planning application. That was a one-line email dated the 23rd of April. I actually printed off their response in December. With your indulgence, I'll just read bits off of it. And it's the bog standard NHS letter, really. The proposed development is likely to have an impact on the service of one branch surgery operating within the vicinity of the application site, Frinton Road Branch Surgery, including its main practice, Thorpe Surgery. The existing GP practice does not have capacity to accommodate the additional need resulting from the proposed development and cumulative growth in the area. Residents within this type of accommodation also generally require an increased level of NHS support. The proposed development would have an impact on primary healthcare provision in the area, and its implications would likely be unsustainable. Currently, Frinton Road Branch Surgery has its list closed to new patients due to resource and capacity issues. Presently, there are general resource and retention issues in the area, which we're all very aware of, which cannot be addressed solely by means of capital investment. In light of the above, NHS England and the CCG submit a holding objection to this application and other significant residential developments in Kirby Cross until a sustainable solution is identified to increase capacity and the situation becomes less pressured in the locality. Well, they haven't actually explained to us what sustainable solution they've actually proposed in their one-line email, and I find that slightly concerning. So I just wonder if the officers could take back to the NHS England and say, if they're going to put one in as they did in December and then just say we no longer intend to seek a 106 agreement, they actually put a bit more information on there for us. Otherwise, I find it's quite hard to come to a decision. Thank you.
Would you care, Mr. to comment on that? Or?
Yeah, certainly it's my experience, Chairman, that the NHS don't tend to look for a contribution for anything under 50 dwellings. That tends to be their normal trigger points. That's my understanding. But yes, we can certainly take your comments back to them without doubt.
John Holmes.
Councillor Holmes?
Yeah. Well, when I was in London, I used to live in flats, and most of the flats that I've ever lived in have always had what they call chutes in the building.
That's right.
is there something we can put in that would make them put the chutes in the building and have great big bins down the bottom that collects it all, and it's easier for the dustman at one pickup point, rather than going in there at the moment, what looked like, 15 bins. Whereas if you get 2 chutes, I mean, I'm sure it ain't a lot of hard work to put a chute into a building if it ain't been built yet, or 2 chutes, one at each end of the passageway or something. Thank you.
Chairman, I agree. It's not actually, that's not shown on the drawings. You know, what we have is what we have before us. And one assumes that, you know, occupants will, you know, as you've seen, take their waste to the, you know, to the separate building for that purpose. But I do take the point. I'm not sure we can force them to put those sort of facilities in, unfortunately, but I absolutely take the point. That would make life slightly easier. Yep. Yep. It's not something under planning we could enforce on that, I don't think.
Other speakers? Yes, Councillor.
On the site visit this morning, I noticed that there was a bus stop there, which we saw via the fence. Are you bringing that up? Do you have any photos of that? That's it. Now, as you can see, that's quite a famous bus stop, that, because it's right on that bend that comes under, and with little or no facility for people to actually stay there in comfort. I was quite amazed that at his county council highway were not insisting on some form of a lay-by there, which would then render people of a mature age a lot more safety. This is something which I picked up. This is quite known and causes major problems when the buses stay there. This isn't always a single bus. Sometimes there are multiples, 2 buses. And people of my age, may I add, do tend to use buses if they can get away with using that rather than the car. Would you like to?
John Haynes.
Chairman, I absolutely take the point. I think that it's an obvious thing to say, but I suppose the problem is the bus stop is there already. And to try and insist on perhaps more, I think if there wasn't a bus stop, then we'd certainly be looking for one there. But probably asking for some sort of parking bay is probably beyond what we could ask of the applicant in this particular case. I think there's already provision for a bus stop, and I suspect that's what the Highway Authority were looking at. I think in addition, if we were looking to insist on a bay there, it would almost certainly impact on the proposed site layout. So I think we'll be back to the drawing board to a certain extent with that. But I don't think, Chairman, in this case, it's something we could insist on, quite frankly. But certainly the point is taken.
Yeah, I'd support the councillor on that particular point. We know the previous bus stop, the front and side of that, when a bus pulls up there, the other side of the bridge, it totally stops the traffic going through. And here is a case where it's right opposite the cemetery too. And a bus pulling up there could cause all manner of problems. I also take the officer's point that Essex County Highways, unfortunately, don't insist on one. It's yet another example. But this was a classic case, in my mind, of making a lay-by to get the bus off the road at that point. Councillor Holmes.
Can we go back to the block picture, please?
The block plan?
Yeah.
The site plan.
That's it. The ones that are facing on the road, just inside the red line, is that a footpath going down the side there with back fence gates, or is that the front?
Yeah, that's the front of the property. So that's
is the front of the property.
So that's actually hedging proposed at that particular point. So they are quite close at the front there to the...
They are very close. Can you just go back to the bus stop now, please? that's going to go then?
No, the bus stop will stay there. That's
No,
really-
not the bus stop. I'm talking about all the hedges.
To a certain extent, a lot of that will go, yes, but it'll be replaced by a new, obviously much narrower hedging. That's the proposal.
I'm not happy with the hedges going. How much is the gardens at this point here? How big are the gardens on them 6 or 8, 6?
Yeah, in terms of depth, they're about 8 metres in depth, I think. That's roughly it. I mean, we've looked at the garden sizes, they do meet the...
Oh, I'm not saying they don't meet it. I'm saying, couldn't it be possible to move them back a bit? Because it seems like you ain't going to get a lot in there once you put that... What's the footpath there, sorry? Do you know the size of the footpath?
Just there, it's probably about 2 metres in width, I would think.
There's no room for a hedge.
So it's going to be 6 foot back from the fence.
Too tight.
Is that red line the fence there that you can see in the...
That's it, yeah.
So the house is going to be... Well, the footpath is going to be on top of the fence, virtually, yeah? That's what you're saying.
Close to it, yeah.
So how are they going to put a hedge in there when they're going to be right on top of their... They're going to put it on this side, are they? The road side, which is not belong to them.
You can just see on there, there's another line just behind the red
Yeah,
line.
I see that, yeah.
And that's where the hedge will sit. So there will be immediately adjoining that hedge. The front of the property will
So
join
we're going to
it.
see all the properties on the front there. Every one of them.
Yeah, you'll be able to see them quite clearly,
Yeah. Okay.
Councillor Bennison.
Thank you. Still on the subject of the bus stop, it's only just been moved there. As you say, it was the other side of the railway bridge up until fairly recently. So it's only just been moved there. You can see how narrow the path is there as you're going up towards the railway bridge. But I think Essex County Council Highways has missed a trick when they put that bus stop there, because there is a lay-by just a few yards up the road where you could have had a bus pull in and a shelter, but they chose to put it there right by the railway bridge where it causes congestion. You can see that queue of traffic waiting to go under the bridge because the buses stop there. They have to travel through the railway bridge. They have to go in the middle of the road to get through, which causes congestion. We also have the problem with the... I mean, it's very, very congested now, but it's with another 41 dwellings there, it will be even worse because we have the Halstead Road development with, I did write it down, 200 odd houses, with also, 240 in Halstead Road, 216 at Martello Caravan site at Kirby. There's already congestion along Thorpe Road, Kirby Cross, Frinton Road, Kirby, and Kirby Road at Great Holland at rush hour periods. And in the summer, it's horrendous. These 41 dwellings are going to make it much more difficult. And it's difficult. It will be difficult to get out of that turning into queues of traffic. So I really think it's in the wrong place. Yes, we may need houses, affordable housing, but I think this is in the wrong place. And I think the congestion is going to be even more horrendous as these become occupied. We've also got the problem with construction traffic, which won't be able to get under the railway arch, so it will have to be diverted through Valley Road and along Holland Marshes to get to that site. So it's definitely in the wrong place, thank you, in my opinion.
All right, Councillor Haney.
Please can we go back to the slide that Councillor Holmes was talking about? Thank you. Where's the bus stop in relation to...
Just there.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody's going to have it absolutely slap up in their room, practically. Those houses have got sort of pokey bits coming out of the right. I don't know if those are the doors. I mean, you know, on the left-hand side, you know, those pointy bits.
Just there, yeah.
Yeah. That appears to go through the hedge. Are there gaps in the hedge? And anyway, you'll never get a hedge to grow there with the houses, the footpath. The hedge won't survive. But what are these? Are there gaps in the hedge, those? Because how are you going to get round there? If there's a hedge there, how are people going to get to the front door, that bit going out? If that's meant to be the front of the houses, it doesn't make sense. Because that's the back, I understand.
Yep.
So that's the front door on the other side. Well, how are you going to get to the front door in the middle house there? Because if you go back to the other one,
Yeah,
I mean,
so
that's the front.
That's the front elevation.
Yes, but could we go back to the last slide? What I mean is, the pokey bits out of the front doors.
Yep.
So the middle house, that goes right up to the footpath. Then you've got so how is the next person going to get into their front door? Really? Because there's going to be a hedge there. I mean, it's just so tight, this.
It is tight, yeah.
It's too tight. It's just too tight. It's got overdevelopment this side. It doesn't make sense. I mean, from that plan, you couldn't get into the middle house's front door without climbing through the hedge. Doesn't make sense.
Let's go back to the landscape plan, see if that helps.
Well,
So you can
there
it shows it a bit more detail there. So you've got the hedge on the fringe, then there is a slight gap between the hedge and the front of the property. But it is tight, I agree.
Yeah. It looks as though it's better, but it's still far too tight in my view. And you won't get that hedge to grow anyway. With the footpath and the footpath, presumably that's be the hedge and the footpath.
Councillor Everett?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. To get on to another issue, drainage. Anybody that lives in this locality will know that the site suffers from very poor drainage, both surface and, in fact, foul water drainage, and substantial work had to be done to service the other building on the site, and in fact caused severe delays for that site coming to fruition. Can officers tell me, please, what has been submitted to us regarding, firstly, surface water drainage, and what has been submitted to us regarding foul water drainage in relation to this application, please?
Chairman, those details are subject to conditions, so they're being sought by condition. So those details will have to be submitted at a later stage and to be determined at that stage. So it will be secured, those details.
Thank you. I thought you were going to say that. This is not an outline permission. This is a full permission. So we should have that information in front of us if we are to make an informed decision. It's such a big and controversial, potentially, decision, this, that I don't think that we are in the position to make a proper decision without that sort of information. And given the comments coming around from various colleagues around here tonight, I think we're doubly in that situation with a lot of things, not just only drainage. So I'd like to propose that we refuse this application on grounds of all of the issues that have been mentioned here tonight. And that's my proposal.
Do I have a seconder? Right. Any further debate? Yes. Yes, Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just that seeing how it's happening to me, staying. Forgive my naivety, if that's what it is, but if we could look at page 28 and 6.25, there's reference there made about concerns about the development's impact made by the Great Holland Residents Association and the impact on the highway safety and the capacity of the local road network. But it does say, however, Essex County Council, in its capacity as the local highway authority, has considered the proposal and concluded that it would be acceptable from a highways perspective, subject to a number of conditions, the subject of which is highlighted within the summary of their response, are included at the head of this report. I can't see anything. Now, am I being just where I haven't noticed it, if there was anything there?
Page 13 is where the conditions are. Yeah, page 13, there are a number of conditions provided in relation to highways. So number 6, access drive to be constructed as shared use route, provision of 500mm wide overhang strip adjacent to the carriageway, no unbound material. Number 9, no discharge of surface water onto the highway, parking and turning facilities to be provided prior to occupation, residential travel information pack. So yeah, they have provided those conditions.
I have a proposal for refusal, which is, of course, contrary to officer's recommendation. Therefore, you know what I'm going to ask for the list of items on which you want to oppose this before I actually take the vote. Yes, Councillor Holland.
I mean, I find with these drawings, they're not very informative. And reading this and this, it's not very informative either. It seems to me that they've left a lot out as regarding letting us know anything. They've just put it together, this is what they want. They're not prepared to talk because there's nothing really we can talk about. It's a full permission. I don't think there's enough information in this planning application. Not for us anyway, well, not for me. Sewage for a start, we always get something on sewage, and as you say, there's nothing here at all on sewage.
Yeah.
We don't even got, they ain't even written anything in, have they? Normally we get a sewage in here, don't we?
Yeah, page 23, Councillor, second 23. Paragraph is the Anglia Water say that they can deal with it from the site, but it's an unacceptable risk of flooding further downstream.
We haven't got shown a drainage structure there.
Yep.
No.
Jim, just so we have asked for conditions on that, so just to bear that in mind, it will have to be supplied.
Sorry, can I make a comment?
Right, yes, further comments then.
Just the fact that if we're going to pass this as a done deal, we should see the drainage strategy. They should have sent it in, and I don't agree with the fact that they haven't. Anglian Water asked for one, and they haven't provided it. And I would have liked to seen a slide which showed how near the flats were to the main care home, because it sort of goes round in a V, so they would be actually very, very near it. I was looking at it today. If it comes back,
Right, Councillor Baker.
Sorry.
Chairman, I appreciate that there's a proposal on the table to refuse, but my view is that if the applicant doesn't comply with the conditions that are listed on pages 12, 13 and 14, the head of planning is going to be authorised to refuse it anyway. So if they don't provide a detailed surface water drainage strategy that is asked to be and is acceptable, then it's liable to be refused on those grounds because of the lack of conditions that have been complied with, I would suggest.
Chairman, I was going to add, I mean, obviously it's a regular occurrence that we place these sort of conditions on planning permissions, whether they're outline or full applications. We wouldn't necessarily want all details put before us at this stage. And as you know, as has been noted, they will have to supply those details. If they don't meet the requirements of the AWA and the Essex Suds team, well, it won't go anywhere. They won't get through to build the scheme. So they will have to meet those conditions prior to commencing works.
Right. Councillor Everett?
My understanding is that for us to make a decision, we have to see all material considerations before us before we can make a decision, especially on a full application. With an outline application, it's fair point, you can wait for information to come in. But for a full application, for us to be able to determine this, we need to have the full facts in front of us. We haven't got them.
Right. Councillor Bennison.
And then Brown.
Thank you. As there are so many conditions, 24 of them, and we haven't got all these facts, perhaps it would be better for us to defer this until they come back with some more information for us to be able to make an informed decision, because we can't make an informed decision at the moment.
I've got Councillor Brown, then I'll take... Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make a comment, really. When we rode up there this morning, my thoughts were this is an ideal place for it. It's well screened. But when you see that drawing there, and following Councillor Heaney's comments about the hedge would be very unlikely to grow nice and thick on the front, I think I'd like to see a street scene. We haven't got one, have we? No. Well, that would be good.
No. Councillor Alexander?
Thank you, Chair. I'm minded to second the deferment.
If I do, I'll take it.
I believe, as an addendum to the original proposal, that what we're looking at is well needed in our area, and I think that I have no problem with the concept of what they're trying to do. What I am worried about is the lack of planning and design. It does not seem as if it's complete. There appears to be pieces missing, picked up by Councillor Everett. So I'm going to second it, if I may.
Right. Well, in a matter of procedure, I would have to take the first proposal. Councillor Holmes?
Yeah, I was concerned about the hedgerows, and condition 21 is all trees and hedgerows be retained to be protected in accordance with BS 5837 unless otherwise agreed. Has the officers agreed to anything different that on this site? Has anything been done? I mean, that's supposed to be a condition. Yet have they spoke to anyone about it?
They'd have to supply full details of that, Chairman, so that we are satisfied that that any replacement detail would be acceptable. So that we wouldn't share on
Sorry. That. Right. Now I have a proposal and a seconder for refusal. You will vote on that first. If that is lost, then I can take the proposal to defer. Councillor Everett is the proposer. Right. So the first proposal, I'm sorry, sir, I can't take you at this stage. No, I can't take you at that stage. All right. Right.
Can I say something? Can I quickly say something?
I'm going to roll now. We've had a lot of debate. The proposer and the seconder of the first application for refusal has been withdrawn. So we are now discussing the deferment so that it can come back to us again where the applicant has heard some of the comments. Right, now you know what you've got. I'll give Councillor Heaney a chance because we're now talking about deferment, so that's what the debate should be on now. Right, any further? Councillor Heaney, do you wish to raise?
Well, I was actually going to say that I object to this because I consider it's overdeveloped, but I'm no problem with anything coming on this site, this sort of thing, at all. But I think this is overdevelopment, and I would be wanting to vote against it.
Right, okay.
But if I've got to vote for deferring it, I will vote for deferring.
You are now, that's what I'm going to put to you. We've been on it quite some time now. Yeah, it would be helpful if you could give me a list of items that you are deferring this for.
Better to vote it down if it's overdevelopment and then get them to come back.
I'm going to ask the officer if he's taken any notes on what we could defer it on. If not, I'm asking the councillors.
I think members certainly want clarification in terms of the layout of the site and whether that, and how it fits within the site in terms of the particularly the western boundary. I think that needs clarification. I think in terms of the waste bin access as well, that needs clarification. They were the two issues I picked up. And I know Council Everett's raised the issue of drainage, but that would be picked up through a condition. I think certainly in terms of, we perhaps need additional details in terms of layout. I think that's what members were looking for, really.
Yeah, and whether it's how close that is to the care home, the flats to the care home, and the fact that...
Right. Any further points that people wish to add as a reason for deferring and you want brought back to you?
Can I say that there's lack of information in the drawings as far as we're concerned? As a committee?
Yeah.
Jim, street scene was just mentioned. That's something else, though.
Yes, street scene could be added. Yes, Councillor.
Presumably the street scene would cover my view that there's a lack of planning design in front of us. Am I right?
You could say that. Right. Yeah.
Yes, insufficient parking for the number
yes.
of dwellings and likely occupants.
Number of parking.
Well, I did actually ask the officer a question, and I have had no reply. May I ask that question again?
Repeat your question.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. You're concerned about the street scene, etc. Would that cover what I said about lack of design before us for us to make a fair and open decision on this present application? Is that what we're talking about? Especially entrance and exit on the road opposite that crematorium?
Yeah.
Chairman, yes, I think it would help enormously to have a full street scene detail.
It would. It would.
And perhaps a bit more detail about particularly the western boundary of the site.
Right. You have got sufficient, I think, now.
Oh, and the waste coming shoots. And is that possible? Waste shoots?
Yeah. Cannot now. Right, I'm going to put the proposal for deferment to you, please. And the proposer I have, and the seconder. You've got the seconder?
Yes, the proposer's Councillor Benison and the seconder's Councillor Alexander.
Right. Councillor Benison, Councillor Alexander are the proposer and seconder. Those in favour of deferment, please show. And those against, please show. Right.
I'm abstaining.
And there are 2 abstentions in that case. So that is deferred. Right. Thank you very much.
For the actual site. It's far too small.
We are
big at all.
We're now going to move on to the second agenda item. It's on page 35, those of you with agendas. It's planning application 18-00678. This is a detailed application and it's for land south of Station Road, Wrabness. And Mr. Noice, I think.
Chairman, thank you. Yes, this is a reserve matters application for 18 dwellings and provision of a 2.hectare village green land south of Station Road, Wrabness. Again, members went to the site this morning. So that's the application site itself, slightly irregular shape boundary to the southern boundary. You'll be aware that the village hall is next door to the site. Further along the road, along Station Road, you've got semi-detached two-storey dwellings. As part of the detail that's been supplied, there will be retention of a strip of land which provides access from the highway to the agricultural land to the rear. That's the site itself. As I said, it's a slightly irregular shaped site. The current site consists of open agricultural land. There's a fairly mature hedge to the western boundary. Then, as noted, it meets the village hall to the east side. So that's the view looking towards the village hall, which is this building here. Then the two-storey dwelling slightly further along. There is an existing hedge on that boundary. That again is looking again just past the village hall car park and to the two-storey dwellings. That's looking across the field itself. As noted, it's been an open agricultural field. There's little or no vegetation or tree cover within the site itself. That's looking back to the village hall and then to the western boundary. So under the adopted local plan, this is the site here to the left-hand side of the screen. You can see where the village hall is. Under the emerging plan, it now includes this land. As noted, the site already has outline planning permission, and tonight we're just looking at the reserve matters, which include access, scale and design. That was the indicative layout provided as part of the original application. I think in terms of the now detailed site layout, it does mirror to a certain degree what was submitted at outline stage. So that's now the current submitted plan. As I mentioned, there's an existing buffer strip to the left-hand side, which will be retained as an open access. It is proposed to have a planted buffer, a 5-metre wide strip around the southern and eastern boundaries, which I think is a necessity, taking into account the nature of the open nature of the field in this location. As noted in your report, there's a mix of two-storey and single-storey dwellings within the site. The single-storey dwellings, as I'm showing on the plan here, you've got some in the southwest corner. In the southeast, and on that plot there next to the village hall, is also a bungalow. You've got a garage which immediately adjoins the boundary just south of the village hall. You've got other single-storey dwellings within the site. But then, again, you've got 1.5-storey and then 2-storey dwellings to the site frontage. I think members asked the question about which of the dwellings was going to be the affordable housing unit. It's this property here, number 1, which is located in this position. And again, that was secured under the original Section 106 agreement. This is the proposed open space, which again has been secured for delivery via a management company under the existing 106. So in terms of detail, these are the proposed dwellings. You've got a mix of, as I said, single-storey and 2-storey dwellings, reasonably traditional in nature in terms of their design. I'll just quickly go through those. So you've got a mix of 2 and 3-bed properties, 1.5-storey as shown here. So, as I said, a mix of designs, but very traditional in nature. That's the affordable unit. It's a 2-bed unit. I'd have discussed this matter with the housing department today. The need for affordable housing is predominantly for 2-bed housing within the Wrabness area. So hence that's why when the outline was approved 3 years ago, a 2-bed dwelling was agreed as a gifted unit to the council. That remains the case today. And that's just some garage details. This is the landscape plan. Again, I've mentioned the 5-metre buffer to the rear. There'll be an attenuation pond in this location on the open area, with a footpath leading through the site to link up to a footpath adjoining the village hall. Again, you've got a mix of brick walls. You've also got additional hedging being proposed along the site frontage as well. And that's just the other side of the site. So again, there'll be the retention of hedging along there, and also on the western boundary there'll be additional hedging proposed. But I think importantly there will be a 5 metre buffer on to the rear of the site. So that's the proposed scheme, Chairman. As noted, we're looking at the detailed design in tonight's application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. No member of the public speaking for or against, so call on Mr. Richard Colley, who's representing the Parish Council.
Good evening. I am the Vice Chairman of Wrabness Parish Council. The Parish Council was consulted on this detailed application, and our comments are recorded on page 43 of your agenda. We raised 6 points about the details. We asked that the garage on plot 18 be recited off the village hall boundary. At the moment, it abuts it. A simple change in the interest of future neighbourliness. It is a village hall in regular public use. Unfortunately, this simple request has not been changed. We dislike the wide roads, the pavements, the street lamps that will serve this development. This development has urbanising highway features which run counter to the rural environment of Wrabness. We objected to the lack of landscape details, and it's good to see, since we were consulted, some have been submitted. The Parish Council is most surprised that the majority of the buffer planting strip proposed around the rural perimeter of the site is beyond the red line delineating the application site. We were under the impression the planning proposals before you related to application sites, and if you look at the latest site plan on your website dated the 26th of September, that is not the case. We support a village green of 0.2 hectares next to our village hall. We have not been consulted on the details of the village green submitted because they came in later in the form of an additional plan. We were very surprised at this omission, and now we're sad to see the detailed proposal is for the village green to be bounded by unwanted new pavements on the application site, and most surprised to see on the landscaping plan the village green is to be subdivided into 2 sections. There's the public area, and then there's a fence which the notation says is designed to prevent pedestrian access into an infiltration basin situated on part of the village green. I didn't know what an infiltration basin was, so Googling it, I see it's a vegetated depression designed to store surface water runoff and infiltrate it gradually into the ground. Well, really. A village green with a subdividing fence and drainage features totally compromises the recreational potential of this modest village green, which, as you've seen today, is currently flat and perfectly suitable for a range of recreational use. Any drainage needs generated by the new estate should be sorted out elsewhere and not impact on the utility of the village green. There is land to the south, as you've seen. Finally, at paragraph 610 of the officer report, we see it relates to the existing Section 106 agreement, which the Parish Council has never seen, and we note for the first time the open space will be maintained by a management company. If this is correct, we are very disappointed. For years, we have campaigned for a village green for community use managed by the community next to our village hall. We believe the village deserves a much better outcome on the matters I've drawn to your attention this evening. Thank you for the opportunity of addressing you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Colley. Ward member hasn't asked to speak, and we have nobody for the applicant, agent or representative either. So, that being the case, just ask Mr. Noice whether he'd like to comment on any of the points that have been made so far.
Chairman, just to make the point about the Section 106 agreement, obviously that was agreed some or best part of 3 years ago. So the issue for the affordable unit and the open space was actually secured through a Section 106 agreement at that time. Just to refer back to the committee report then, obviously at that time the Wrabness Parish Council did make comments. Would it be useful if I read out the response in terms of the open space that was provided at that time? I think it's useful for members to perhaps hear that because it puts it into context as to why it ended up as a management company. One of the comments put forward by the Parish Council going back 3 years was the 0.2 hectare open space proposal, while superficially attractive, does not satisfy the village green and allotment policies contained in the parish plan, as they are provided for consultation with the village on any proposal received. The public consultation meeting convened in the village has overwhelmingly rejected the offer of public open space linked to the development of 18 houses, and the application offers no allotment provision. The village would rather forego the village green opportunity than agree to an unsustainable housing scheme. So I think at that time there were certainly objections from the village to the principle of development, but I think that probably explains how we came to have a management plan for the Section 106 rather than an agreement with the village itself. Thank you.
Yes, I think that's helpful. Right, councillors, it's up to your good selves. We saw it this morning, and Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chairman. If you can leave that picture up, Mr. Noice, thank you. It's 0.2 hectares of open space. The attenuation pond, whatever you want to call it, at the bottom, how much does it reduce the open space by if that's fenced off, please? If that's if you can work that out.
It'd be roughly 30%, yeah. Yes. I've got it's 162 square metres. But as I said, it would be designed to accommodate water in a flood situation, so it wouldn't necessarily be a pond as such, because clearly water, I think, it's quite high up in the site. I think water would run away from that area quite quickly, but it would be retained as an open area, except in times of flooding. I think that's the way it's supposed to work.
Councillor Baker.
I think there was I'm just trying to find it in the report, but I can't. There was mention somewhere about lighting and the objection by and the gentleman that was there on site this morning about if highways were to adopt the internal roads of the application site, then it would require lighting, and apparently there is no street lighting in Wrabness. So I would suggest that if that is your condition, that we add a condition, if we are minded to approve this, that any lighting would be low level, so that any light pollution would be negated if it has to be there at all. Of course, if Essex County Council don't adopt the roads, then obviously that solves the problem.
They're not going to, are they? They're not going to adopt them now.
Chairman, I fully understand what the member's asking for there. I see no reason why a condition couldn't be applied to ask for lighting details prior to commencement of development, and to ensure we're satisfied with those. For that reason, if the rest of the village doesn't have street lighting, it would seem very odd indeed to have this for normal street lighting. I think you would expect some sort of low-level street lighting on a new development, which I think would be acceptable. I think we can secure that by condition. Thank you.
All right. Councillor McWilliams.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of things. Mr. Coley mentioned the fence. Where is the fence, please?
described, Chairman, on the plan as a knee rail, which suggests it's a very low-level fence. That's what they're talking about. So, as I said, it wouldn't be an enclosed area as such. It is primarily to take flood water in those circumstances. But certainly, as it's shown on the drawing, it would be a knee rail.
If you don't mind, Chairman, if I could just ask something else as well. The garage, I can't see a garage for the affordable housing. Is there one or not, please?
I don't think there is, Chairman. They've shown 2 parking spaces.
Yeah.
So the answer is no to that.
What? Sorry, yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. If I could just ask Mr. Noice to just go back to the street lighting again just for a moment. It's just something that's come up recently where the street lighting has not been to an adoptable standard on a previous development, so therefore cannot be adopted by the County Council. Would this street lighting that would be by condition be of the standard that would be adoptable by the County Council? Thank you, Chairman.
I think we'd have to have that conversation with the county themselves, I think, quite frankly, Chairman.
I think that would be the case. Yes, it expresses, I think, all our fears. There's no street lights in Wrabness. Why make an example of light pollution here, which could be satisfied with these low-level lights just to indicate to the householders where the path is without going over the top. And so I think that's the point that would have to be made to county.
I think we'd work very hard with the county to try and understand why we couldn't have low-level lighting there. There must be locations across the county where that's been accepted before. And taking into account the nature of this site, I think low-level lighting is appropriate. We'll certainly work with the county on that.
Councillor Everett.
Thank you. I seem to be on a drainage kick tonight. SUDS, what's the up-to-date position, please?
Chairman, I think as paragraph 6.31 notes, it is actually a condition on the outline planning permission. So, the drainage system would have to be supplied by condition in any event. So, although it's not been supplied at this stage, they will have to supply those details, before any works can commence, or acceptable details to the County Council. So that will be secured by condition.
So in relation to the holding objection from Essex County Council on SUDS grounds, what's happened to that, please?
We've had no further response from the County Council on that. So we're still waiting for their comment.
So we still have a holding objection from ECC SUDS then? That is the situation. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Bennison. Oh, I beg your pardon, Councillor Heaney first.
What worries me about this is called a village green, but it's not a village green. It's run by a management company, paid for by the people in this, which will be paid for by the people in this house. I mean, if it's a real village green, the parish councillor today said they wanted to look after it themselves. And I find it extraordinary. It's got this great pond in it, which isn't really a pond, but is a dip, which has a rail on it, round it knee high. So it's not to keep children out or anything. And the whole point of a village green, if it was a village green, I mean, I'm a rural councillor, is you can have, parties, village parties or fairs or sales or whatever you want to have, an open day or, a village day on the village green. Doesn't seem as though they're going to be able to do this. For a start, a third is taken up by some quasi-pond, which might be there in the autumn, or it might not. And from what I understood, they're going to be planting on top of it, which will help to soak up any water. I would thought the water, it's on top of a hill and it's quite sandy up there, so it could drain away quite quickly. And how can this be a village green? It belongs to the houses. I mean, can you explain that, please?
I think the reality is, Chairman, it is open. It is the open space which goes with with this particular development. I think the fact it's obviously adjoins the village hall lends itself to being called the village green, and that's the developer's choice to call it that. But it is open space which serves this development.
Can I come back, John?
Yes.
I mean, that has to be a bogus thing, because it's not a village green. It's a bit of open land which obviously belongs to this development. And if somebody wants to take a dog walk on there or do something, the residents will be able to say, we're looking after this, it's go away, as far as I can see. So why should it be called a village green? It's a bit bogus.
I think the officers explained that 3 years ago, when the outline planning was under consideration, the parish council didn't want it. Now they, I think, can see probably that, yes, it would be very nice, which we had all thought at the time. It's very difficult under the circumstances, but like you, that is a very bit of sandy soil up there, and that although there is a very small incline on it, I think it's highly unlikely that will ever be needed for drainage, but it certainly won't be of a drownable depth that it needs a fence around it, really. That's my thoughts.
Chairman, I've got one more comment. Just one more comment on that. The Section 106 agreement for the land makes it very clear that it's open to the public, not just occupiers of the dwellings.
Good.
Can I come back on that?
Yep.
So it's open to the public to walk on, but they wouldn't be able to have a party or anything like that on it. I mean, I understand why they didn't want it in the first place, because their rationale was we'd prefer not to have the houses and no village green, but now the houses have come and they obviously have to accept the houses. They'd obviously like to be able to use this so-called village green, and it's debatable, isn't it?
Councillor Bennison.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very disappointed to see that the affordable housing is the only house on this estate that doesn't have a garage. It's a very small house, so there won't be much storage in it, and garages are often used for storage. So I think it's disappointing. It's the smallest house and has no garage. That's one point. Under the conditions, there's nothing about the suds under conditions. Will that be added? Thank you.
Chairman, as I mentioned, it's already on the outline planning permission for this site. So the conditions will be there's a load of conditions on the outline, so it's covered by that. I mean, if members are concerned about the garage, one thing we could do is give the head of planning powers to approve the application, subject to what members decide this evening. That it does include a garage on that plot. We can go and negotiate with the developer and ask for that, if that's what members think we should have. Thank you.
Councillor Baker?
I think Mr Noice has actually answered that. I remember we actually refused or deferred a planning application because the affordable housing stuck out like a sore thumb. And I think, as Councillor Bennison has pointed out, it is the only property. If there were others, then I wouldn't be too worried, but it's the only property, and people do find out things. And I think Mr Noice has sort of suggested the way forward. It should have a garage, so it just blends in and looks like any other houses and isn't identified as an affordable one. Thank you.
Yes, councillors. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just some clarification, really, on page 46, condition number 16. The outline consent requires development to provide a 2-metre wide curb foot connecting the existing. Then it goes on to say, and the further recommendation is that this footpath should be provided along the entire frontage to Station Road. Could you explain where that's going to go? Because I don't quite see that in front of me on that map.
Yeah, I'll ask Mr. North to comment, but we saw, did we not, this morning, that the public footpath there is on the north side of the road. It doesn't interconnect at all with their suggestion. So I found that rather interesting.
Sorry. Just put your... Yeah. Again, I keep referring back to the outline planning permission. Unfortunately, that's where the requirement for the footpath, as it states at 6.22, was agreed. And to now add to that, we can't do that as part of this reserved matters application. That's the problem we've got. So as required, the requirement is to provide a 2 metre wide curb footway connecting from the existing vehicle access for the village hall to the proposed vehicle access to the proposed development site. So, there will be a footpath connecting the site to the remainder of the village, which I think is the minimum requirement, quite frankly. But you can't do that under this detail scheme. Any more than that under the detail scheme.
Councillor Everett.
The previous application was an outline application without access. This reserved matters is a reserved matters with access. Surely a footpath is access. So how can it have been agreed at outline stage when we weren't dealing with access and not be agreed at reserved matters stage when we are dealing with access?
I think the way it was covered was through the agreement that wherever the access would be, it would be linked from the proposed access point to the village hall. And I agree at that point there was not a set position where the final access would be. But that was the requirement. So wherever this access was proposed under the detail scheme, that's where the footpath should lead from. So it is controlled in that way under the outline permission. We can't add to that, unfortunately.
With the greatest of respect, usually we are told at every single outline application that drawings and details of that are for information only and are not for making a decision. So as that was an outline application without access, and as we are now in front of us doing a reserved one with access, I would like to propose that we do, in fact, do exactly that, that we do the requirements that the Essex Highways have suggested, that we put a footpath across the entire frontage.
Right. Further talks? Oh, Councillor McWilliams, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just ask a question, please, regarding the village green? And having got the largest village green in the country in our village, I was just wondering, do we know if Village Green Acts are going to be applied to this particular village green? Please.
I'm not aware of that, Chairman.
The village green. It can't be called a village green.
I think it goes back to what I said earlier, Chairman. This is open space serving the development. It's as simple as that.
It is. It's one of those things. It will be in the parish's view to register it, as I'm sure you do appreciate, as a village green, and that was where the argument will take place, if there is to be an argument. Right. Yes, Councillor Fowler, and then I'll take Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chairman. I did wonder if Councillor McWilliams was going to ask my question there for a minute, but she didn't. Regarding the open space, also known as a village green, I shall call it an open space because that's what it will be. Now, I have had experience of these companies that manage these parts of parcels of land, and in my opinion is that they behave badly, some of them. They don't manage it. In fact, they do the opposite. They ignore it. And may I ask the officer if there is anything like an informative, anything like that could be put into somewhere that condition it to prevent the poor residents from having to suffer what some of the other residents at some of these other developments are going through right now? Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman, this again is contained within the original Section 106 agreement for the site. There are certainly covenants within that. And I can go through those with you. So at the moment, there should be a covenant only to permit the open space land to be utilised solely as recreation and amenity land by the general public. So that's in there. A covenant to maintain the open space land in perpetuity in accordance with the open space management plan. A covenant not to transfer the open space land into the individual ownership of the owners of the dwellings. And an obligation, should the council so require, for the management company to enter into a direct covenant with the council to perform the obligations set out in paragraph 2 of this schedule. So it is controlled and will be retained for the for the general public. So that's certainly in there. So they will have to adhere to the management plan they provide.
Good. Councillor Baker.
Chairman, I've just it was going to be about the no updated comments from SUDS, but I just read the paragraph again, and it would appear that there was a condition imposed at outline which would cover it. So I think my question is, I don't need to ask it because I've actually answered it. Thank you. If that makes sense.
Right.
Thank you.
Councillor Everett.
I'd like to ask possibly either the officer or the legal officer, if we decide as a committee that we don't like the agreement made in the Section 106 agreement because it was done prematurely, is there a possibility that we could reopen negotiations on a 106 agreement, and is it possible to have it vary?
Shall I turn to the solicitor's view?
I think that would depend on the interchange between the planning application, so the planning officer will have to give a bit of advice on that. But obviously a planning agreement is a completed contract, so it was completed I think 3 years ago, I think Graham said. So in order to vary it, obviously it needs all the parties to agree to that. It was entered on the information available at the time, and to look to vary it now, I mean, there could be reasons to do that, but I don't think we could require them to change that on the basis of the fact there doesn't seem to be any material change to the information that was there at the time. I think they're complying with the conditions that were given.
I mean, just to add to that, Chairman, I think if the scheme before us was such a departure from what was originally approved under the outline scheme, then you might be in a position where you could refuse this detailed application. That certainly wouldn't be beyond what you could do. But I think to try and unpick an existing Section 106 agreement without the applicant's agreement, you wouldn't get anywhere with that. I think, in my opinion, it would be very, very difficult. It would have to, you'd have to have reasons which went, to the very heart of the permission. And I'm not sure what's before us tonight in terms of detail is so radically different from what was envisaged at that time. Clearly, in terms of highways, and I fully understand your concerns about that. Highways, would have been consulted and at that time agreed that all there had to be would be a footpath between the village hall and the new site access, and that's what the applicant has done, and that's firmly in the Section 106. There is nothing within that for the there's no need for the applicant to move from that, and I'm not sure we could force him to do so. That's the problem I see. Like I say, this would have to be so radically different to what was approved for us to try and change things.
Councillor Everett.
I think that sort of possibly vaguely gives us a way forward, in that I'm rather loath to refuse it. I don't think that we would be being reasonable to do that, but I do think that we would be reasonable to go into negotiations to see whether we could change it. And with that in mind, I'd like to propose that we defer this application for discussions with the developer as to how we can meet the issues that we've discussed, particularly around the village green stroke open space, the footpath across the front of the station road, and I think probably that's it. Oh, and the garage with the with the affordable house, unless others feel that I've missed something.
Garage against the village hall.
Oh, and the garage against the village hall.
Councillor Baker.
And maybe the discussion to be had with county with regard to lighting. If we're going to we're going to defer, we might as well get it all done in one go.
Yep. So I have a proposal now for deferment.
Like to say something.
Yes, Councillor Fowler.
I'll second that, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You prejudged what I was going to ask. On those 4 items, which we would like to have discussions on, the principle of the estate has been pre-decided, and but there are still a little bit more fine-tuning that we would like to do. Right. I'm going to ask you to just comment on that principle.
Do you want to just go through the 4 issues? So there's lighting, obviously. There's the footpath at the front of the site.
Yep.
Open space, village green.
So what would be the query on that?
What can it be? Village green.
The management of it. Yep.
Yeah, the attenuation point. Also, whether the village, it'd be much easier that nobody wants to have a management company, is it right to speak, as Maria said, and they could see whether they could negotiate between the parish council and the landowner or the developer to see if they could cut it or whatever, and they wouldn't have to have a management company then.
I mean, to my mind, that there is nothing to stop the applicant saying, well, no, we want to carry on as we are. I think that's the trouble. Yeah. There's got to be very good reasons for us to move away from what's already been agreed under a Section 106. That's what my concern is.
And I accept that, but that's exactly why we should have that discussion, because if there's goodwill on both sides, then I do believe that we can make what otherwise might have been a refusal into something that is actually acceptable. And I get the feeling going around the table here that there is a mindedness to refuse, but I don't think that we should probably go that far. And I think it would be better to have the discussion to see whether we can take it away from that brink and to make it into something that's more acceptable.
That's fine.
Right. I'm going to take a vote on it now. We've chewed it over well and truly. I have a proposer and I have a seconder for deferment with those 4 items. Those in favour of deferment, please show. And that is unanimous, I think. Yes, it is unanimous. That is deferred. I was hoping to go till... Right. We're now on item A3 on the agenda. Oh, sorry, it's agenda item 7, and it is planning application 18000379. This is an outline for a development at 820 St John's Road, Clacton-on-Sea. Alison's taking this one. Thank you.
Thank you. This is an outline application with only access included for consideration at this stage for 14 dwellings. I'll just draw your attention to the update sheet before we start. There's a correction in relation to the open space comments where superseded comments were put in error, so the contribution would be to Bockings Elm, which is the closest play area to the site. The At the moment we're discussing the need for the legal agreement in terms of how many contributions we have already signed up to for that site. So the recommendation has been changed slightly. So subject to confirmation of the need for the legal agreement, that then would be completed within 6 months. Essex County Council SUDs have removed their holding objection subject to 2 conditions, so they'll be added into the recommendation. So this is the application site here, you can see outlined in red. I'll take you through the site history because you'll see from the application forms that there's quite a few applications in the area going on. So this is the application site. 820 here is to be retained and 824 would be demolished, and all these outbuildings in the rear would also be demolished. This is a neighbouring property, but this mobile home here is within the site, so all of the buildings in this area. In terms of the site history, this was the appeal scheme that was allowed for. This was a full application for 2-storey houses, allowed at Appeal 14. It's a slightly different site area. The current application site includes 820 here and excludes this rear garden, but the site area is basically the same. So for 14, but the current application retains 820. That expired in July, but it's still a very strong material planning consideration for 14 2-storey properties on the site. That was the detail that was approved, full planning permission again, so those elevations were all approved. Members will probably remember that this came to committee in the summer for 84 dwellings. The current application site is here, so we approved access to 84 properties in the same location. Members resolved to approve that subject to a section 106, but the applicant has since said that the scheme isn't viable, so that's an undetermined application at the moment, and I've now got a different application for 62 holiday lodges on the rear of the site, and the current application you can see here is in pale. So this replaces the 84 with 62 holiday lodges as a separate application that we're not considering today, and the 14 that we are considering today. I hope that's clear, the site history. These are some views of the site. So the site boundaries are shown by the fences you can see here. The conifer hedgerow beyond is the site of the holiday lodges. So you can see it's very well screened to the open fields at the back. This screening here is to the large neighbouring garden, and these are the various buildings within the site, none of any merit, that would be demolished as part of the proposals. This is the existing property at 824 and its garden that would be demolished, and the remaining neighbour here at 826. That's the front elevation of the property to be demolished, and this would be the one that would remain with a smaller garden. That's the neighbour at 826 again that would remain. This is the indicative layout, so you're only considering access at this stage. So we've already resolved to grant approval for 84 properties through an access here, and the appeal permission for 14, which has recently expired, had a slightly closer relationship to the neighbour. It had a 4 metre separation. This one has a 7 metres, so they're very comparable. The layout is only indicative. I've raised a lot of concerns with the layout. It's very cramped, and you've got 2 properties squashed here, but this isn't for consideration at the moment. That would be part of the reserve matters. So you're just considering 14 properties on the site with access in this location. It's been brought to committee because it's outside the saved settlement development boundary, but it's inside the draft boundary. We've obviously already recently had an expired permission for 14. We accepted 84 on the site, so we agree it's a highly sustainable site. It's just the detail of the proposal that's before us today. And this is the detail of the access, so the visibility displays and the footpath into the site, and 820 would retain its existing access. So there's no objections from highways. The SUD's objection's been removed. So the application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All we have in speakers here, Mr. Peter Legree, the agent for the site.
Thank you, Chairman, members. To be honest, I haven't got a great deal more to add to the presentation. I'm pleased with the presentation that you've received from Alison. That has developed some more of the comments that I would like to have put to you, because I felt that the report did not necessarily provide you with a full explanation of the past history of the site. I'm sure when members went to the site this morning, they felt that they had been here before, and you had indeed. But that has been clarified by Alison Alison, so I thank her for that. Otherwise, as has been pointed out in the update sheet, the issues regarding the SUDS matters with the County Council have now been resolved. We're very disappointed they've taken so long to be resolved. You've heard that concern raised this evening as well, and it may be that something that could be said by the Council to Essex County Council, because that is holding up a considerable number of other applications, both ours and other agents. So that's something of considerable concern. But otherwise, we believe this is merely a variation to a scheme that was allowed on appeal before. There is a need to change the scheme for the 84 dwellings that you've seen before. The viability issue actually stems from a covenant on the land, and the covenant was actually imposed by Tendring Council. But that's another story for another day, but explains the circumstance why that scheme is not necessarily proceeding. But as far as this scheme is concerned, it's merely a variation to a scheme that has been previously approved, and I hope members will concur with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, colleagues.
I've just got one little question.
Right, Councillor Heaney.
Can I just ask you one question? On the road layout, which not that one, it appeared, that's it, absolutely. It appears to just take off the corner of that bungalow, who I understand is nothing to do with the application. Is that right?
This bungalow.
That bungalow on the right, that belongs to somebody else who's not involved in the application. Is that right? It looks as though it's slightly going to take off the front of the garden there. Is that right or not? So.
No.
Mm.
Thanks. No, that is within the application site 824. You can see it here retained. So it will keep its own access, and the visibility displays and the curve of the access would cross, but it's within the ownership of the applicant.
That's all right. Sorry, I was just a bit confused. Baker, Mr. Baker, Councillor Baker.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chairman. Two questions. We approved the 84 and access was agreed. If this access is extremely similar or the same, then we can't unagree it, I'm presuming, is the first question.
There's no highway safety concerns from Essex County. It's basically in the same position. 820 was demolished there, but the width of the road is the same, so there's no additional harm from that.
And the second question is, it's a development of 14 properties. I don't see any affordable housing on here. I thought that any developments of 10 or more, there was an affordable housing criteria. Because in the appeal, way back when, the appeal inspector agreed that there should be three-bedroom houses provided as affordable, and that was in the 106, or the unilateral undertaking that was signed. Can you comment on that, please?
Yeah, that's a change in local plan position between the two times. So this site is included within Clacton currently. I know it's moving to St Noseth ward, isn't it? But it's within Clacton, so it's classed as being under the limit of 15 to need to provide affordable housing because it's within a town rather than being within a village.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. Further questions? Councillor Everett.
Yeah, I'd like to unpack that last statement, actually. My understanding it was anything over 10. So where does the 15 come from?
It's like a lot of things in planning, it's a bit confusing. There's this overall limit on contributions for anything under 10, under 11 properties that we can't ask for any planning contributions. But the 15 limit is a local plan requirement for our towns that until you reach that level within towns, you don't have to provide for affordable housing. You still have to provide for open space as they're doing in this proposal. But the affordable limit doesn't kick in until you hit 15 in a town.
Can you point me to the policy, please?
It'll be HG4 in that plan. That's the adopted plan. I don't think we've got the plans here. Sorry, the site area.
What's the site area?
0.7 hectares.
Oh, so in fact it is okay to ask for a contribution then, because it says in policy HG4A, from settlements over 3,000 population, housing developments for 15 or more dwellings, or residential sites of 0.5 hectares or more. So therefore that would mean that we would want a contribution.
Councillor Baker, while we're looking for that.
I'm glad Councillor Everett's got a copy of the 2007 thing to look at. I can't understand if it was agreed by the planning inspector that 14 would have 3, and that was within the 2007 plan, how it can change. I'm getting a bit confused as to how we can now say that if the planning inspector said one thing, how can we now go against what the planning inspector says? If that makes sense.
So we're just going to go and get the emerging local plan policy.
Mm-hmm. Should have brought that one too.
While we're waiting for the new plans explanation, is there anything else, or in principle, and that's all we're talking about at the present moment, are there any other objections to the scheme? It's 14 properties. It's a question of whether or not there is a contribution due. Yes, Councillor Everett.
In that same light, is there a need for an education provision? Question mark.
Right.
Councillor Brown, thank you.
Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Chair. Can I have a look at the road layout? I just want to ask a simple question. On that one you've just come off of, there's no entrance into the proposed development on the right at the back there, is there? There's no linkage, is there, whatsoever?
To the caravan?
Yeah, on one of the other layouts you had a link.
Yeah.
Well, that's the old one, isn't it? But you had another one, yes, that one, that still shows a connection. I gather that's not to be so.
My understanding is it will go into the other site. But,
We're not considering layout at the moment on this site, so the detail at this end of the site isn't agreed. And again, this is a separate application, but to link through there, we haven't had any issues from the Highway Authority on that site. We obviously agreed 84 houses with no issue there, so it seems likely that they would put a link through there, but there's nothing agreed in this application to either secure it or prevent it.
While we're still searching, Councillor Holmes?
Yeah, I mean, we can still search for this, but I propose that we accept this application.
Right. Do I have a seconder on that?
I'll quite happily second it, Chairman, with obviously once we've had the discussion about the affordable and anything else.
Yeah. So it's a question now to the officers on contribution, not only for the houses, affordable houses, and contribution on education. Right.
Apologies for the delay. Yes, so the trigger, it's not 15 or more dwellings, but it is over 0.5 of a hectare. It's 0.7, so it should provide affordable housing, so we can change the recommendation that's on your update sheet to secure the open space to secure affordable as well, which would be 30% in accordance with the policy.
Right, that being the case, I have a proposal for approval subject to that clause, and it's proposed by Councillor Holmes, I think, and Councillor Baker seconded it, so you know what we're talking about. That's the drawing. Those in favour of approving this site, please show. That is unanimous. That is approved.
We'll have to come back, though, won't it?
If it's... We're just going to have a short comfort break as we've been going for 2 hours.
I better go.
And we've still got 4 more by my reckoning, or 3 more now, one's taken out. Right, councillors, we move on. And we're now on to A4, which is agenda item 8 on page 63. It's planning application 1801381 full, land adjacent to 2 Wivenhoe Road, Alresford. And turn to Michael for this one.
Thank you, Chairman. Yep, so this application before members relates to land adjacent to 2 Wivenhoe Road within Alresford. It seeks full planning permission for the erection of 3 detached residential dwellings and is before the committee as the applicant works within the planning department. You'll note on the update sheet there's been a couple of amendments since the report was issued. These are a representation from Councillor Scott, who confirmed he would have called a decision in to be determined by committee had it not already been required to be before you anyway. An amendment to condition 1 to the standard 3-year time limit, and 6 additional conditions, including soft landscaping details, removal of PD rights for boundary treatments, and 3 highways conditions. So here's the site laid out in red just there. You can see, well, it's just on the edge of the settlement of Alresford. The majority of the development is just located to the west. This is a sort of better aerial image, really. You can see a bit further out and just see that it is quite urban to the west there, but the site itself is actually just laid to grass currently. So this is an extract from the emerging settlement development boundary. So you can see that the site in the bottom right corner of the screen there, it falls just within there. We'll just run you through a couple of photographs of the site. So this is the looking southwest of the site. So the access point is just beyond the 30 mile per hour zone sign just there. Here's a little bit of a better view, just where my car's parked just there. That's where the access point is. Thank you very much. This is a view of the site looking east. So you can see the site's laid to grass, as I mentioned before. There's sort of heavy mature vegetation, to the boundary just there. Here's a site looking to the south of the site. How clear it is to you, you can see the post and rail fencing just at the back there, which marks the actual boundary of the site. This is the proposed site layout. So you can see the 3 detached dwellings. Plot 1 here is obviously of a quite larger size, but that being said, plots 2 and 3 are equally quite substantial sites themselves. So I'll just run through the elevations for you now. So this is the proposed elevations for plot 1. And this is the proposed floor layout for it as well. And here is the proposed cart lodge to go alongside plot 1. You can see it's a garage / carport at ground level and a sort of garden equipment storage area to the first floor. This is the elevations for plot 2, and very similar but a differing use of materials for plot 3. They both have the exact same floor layout. And here's the proposed street scene, so it gives you a really good indication of just how it might look. Okay, so I think I need to start really with the history of the site. So members will note that in 2013, this application you can see on the screen before you was an outline for 5 dwellings, and it was refused on the grounds that it would represent a significant extension of ribbon development outside of a defined settlement limit, which would result in a harmful intrusion into the rural street scene. This decision was actually upheld at appeal. However, in 2015, planning permission was granted for 1 dwelling when the council was in a position where it was unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing supply. We therefore had to assess it on its own merits and assess it against the 3 strands of sustainability, so we felt it met the economic, the social and environmental strands. So this is the layout for that 1 dwelling. You see it's quite a large plot there. And there's a couple of elevational drawings as well, so you can get a feel for what it was going to look like. Yeah. So, since this being approved a couple of years ago, that meant that it was then included within the emerging settlement boundary for Alresford in the emerging local plan. So this represents a key and material change in policy since the original refusal that we've got here back in 2013. So therefore, the principle of development on this site is considered to be acceptable. It's also just worth pointing out as well that since the determination of this 2015 plan permission, the council now do not ask for contributions towards equipped play area and open space for developments of less than 10 dwellings following a government ruling in 2016. So again, it's quite a change in policy since that decision. So in terms of the design, they're 3 detached dwellings, as I said before, each 2 stories, each serving 4 bedrooms. They will be slightly set back to the majority of the development running to the west, but they will help to build upon a strong pattern of development that's already in existence. So we have no issues in terms of the layout. There's no set building type to the immediate surrounding area that would necessarily need to be adhered to, but that being said, the dwellings are considered to be of a good and varied design. They all have their own individual appearance. They incorporate key features that I feel break up the bulk of the dwellings. So you can see there's like front dormers, canopies, single-story extensions, a different use of materials, and it just adds to an overall good impression visually. In terms of... Sorry. That's all right. In terms of private amenity space, as I showed on the site layout earlier, you can see for 3 dwellings or more, there should be a minimum requirement of 100 square metres. It comfortably and substantially exceeds that for all 3 developments, but in particular for plot 1. In terms of the impact to the neighbours, the only neighbour that could really be impacted is the one adjacent to the west, which is number 2 Wivenhoe Road. However, the development has been designed so that the dwelling that's nearest, which is this one here, plot 3, you've got a single-storey element there that breaks up the impact to the neighbour. So given that and a good separation distance, there's not considered to be harm in terms of any significant loss of light or the dwellings appearing imposing to that neighbour. In terms of overlooking, there's no first-floor side elevation windows that can directly overlook to the neighbouring garden, whilst the first-floor rear elevation windows will have views more to the rear section of the garden that's generally not going to be occupied anywhere near as regularly. So therefore, the relationship of the development to the adjacent neighbouring properties is considered acceptable. The application site is set to grass and is well screened by a number of trees along the northern boundary. Whilst the development can be implemented without harming these trees, it would be advised they are retained for their visual merits and to help screen the site. There is a large oak tree situated in the highway in front of 2 Wivenhoe Road that is protected by a TPO. However, the tree will not be impacted by the proposed works. The plans also show that with the exception of the hedge to the west of the access point, all trees along the southern boundary are to be retained and physically protected during construction. Therefore, subject to conditions to secure the steps of how the retained trees will be physically protected during construction, details of boundary treatments and soft landscaping, the impact of the trees and landscape is considered acceptable. Essex Highways Authority have been consulted on the application. They've raised no objections, subject to conditions. And with regards to parking, for a dwelling with 2 or more bedrooms, the minimum requirements are 2 parking spaces measuring 5.5 metres by 2.9, or if a garage has been used as one of the spaces, it's 7 metres by 3 metres internally. All 3 plots do have garages attached to them, but they do fall just short of the 7x3 internal requirements. However, there's significant space in front of each of the properties to comfortably to get the necessary parking. So there's no concerns with that. In terms of representations that we've received, Alresford Parish Council have objected to the plans, highlighting the previous refusal of 5 dwellings on the site, and also raising concerns with the access point being adjacent to bus and car traffic. We've also received 10 letters of objection. I'll summarise their concerns. The access point is not suitably located. The site has previously been refused for multiple dwellings. It will result in a significant increase in traffic movement to that previously approved. It will set a precedent. The site is substantially outside of a settlement boundary. The pressure it will result to the existing infrastructure, and the scale will not be in keeping with surrounding properties or the rural landscape. In summary, following the inclusion within the settlement boundary of Alresford within the emerging local plan, the principal development is acceptable. The design, layout and impact to neighbours are all considered to meet relevant plan policies, while subject to conditions there is no harm to trees, landscape or highway safety. The development is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, question of speakers. Parish Council representative, Councillor Ernie Osborne, who I can see there. If you'd like to come forward, Councillor. And you've done this so many times. I know you're aware that once you've got the microphone live and it's stayed live, you've got 3 minutes.
Well, thank you very much. Nice to see you all again. Seems like only a couple of hours ago. If ever you want advice on how to work the system, then refer to this case. It is a classic. This is how you do it. Apply for planning approval for 5 houses. If they're turned down, chances are you'll get it on appeal anyway. If that doesn't succeed, what you can do is better ask your architect to speak to planning officers and get advice as to what would be acceptable on this site. Your architect will probably be the best person to do this because he knows most of the planning officers and he obviously has the personal contacts. A few years ago, the advice from an officer may have been go for aspirational design. That was put forward then. 2 years ago, in this case, it would have been an eco-friendly build. So from all of a sudden, planning refused to planning approved. Now what you do then is that you sit on it for a couple of years, do nothing. Then you have the situation that where it has been before outside the settlement boundary, it's now inside the settlement boundary, and planning approval can be given on this site. Approval by highways for access is dangerous at this corner and the junction, and very busy, and there's a very busy road. So this would have been approved. Now sell the land with planning approval, which is all that you wanted to do in the first place. So all this procedure, all this nonsense about houses being approved, disapproved, at the end of the day, what's happened here is the person that owned the land is really only doing it so that they themselves can sell the land and with building approval already done. The current application is for 3 houses. It's not difficult. It's not too difficult from the original application that was refused by TDC and the inspectorate. No notice of planning intent was sent to residents in the area, apart from number 2, Wivenhoe Road. No other residents were informed. The question is, why was this not done? I do hope this is a genuine mistake on the part of the planning officers, because I understand that this particular application to build has been made by a member of the planning team for their own personal use. Knowing the residents were not informed. The applicant wrote letters to all the residents in the local area, but failed to mention that the application was for 3 houses, not for one. It was for 3 houses, and not, it was for not one house as indicated. The applicant told me that this was a mistake, but has done nothing about it to rectify that matter. Most residents believe it was one single dwelling. They wouldn't have appealed against because they thought it was the original one dwelling. As permission would have been given already for one dwelling. Look, we have 810 dwellings in Alresford at present. We have a further 318 that have been approved. We don't have the infrastructure to cope with the increase now. And we need another 3 dwellings like a hole in the head. That's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the other speaker I have down is Mr. Ian Spencer.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. My name is Ian Spencer. I'm the architectural designer for the projects. I just draw the attention that the site is in the settlement development, so there is a presumption in favour of development. Really, talking about the design of the scheme is where I come from. What I've tried to do with this is use a traditional design, keeping the materials to sort of flow through the unit. So we've got the roof materials, the plain tiles run onto one scheme, and then we got onto one plot. Then we got the boarding continues on to the other schemes. So the whole development flows, if you like. The only other thing I just wanted to pick up on, took careful design when designing plot 3. That's the one that's nearest to Wivenhoe Road. We obviously were concerned about overlooking on that and the mass. So as the planner pointed out, we've used a single-storey element against that plot and kept the windows out of the gable ends so we avoid overlooking. The other thing I just going to mention was about the trees. Obviously, the trees on the road frontage are very important. It's a good visual amenity. So we're retaining all the trees on the site. And I think that's really all I can say on it. Thank you, anyway.
Right, thank you very much, sir. Ask Mr. Pingram if he wants to add anything. No? In that case, councillors.
It was Councillor Holmes that wants to speak earlier.
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you very much. It's got permission for one dwelling, but this particular dwelling that it's got permission for is certainly a cut above most houses that are being built anywhere in the country. It was given, I assume, because of the intricacy of the build that was supposedly. Could you put it back onto it, please, Michael? That's it. I mean, that is one hell of an unusual house, and I can firstly understand why they might give permission for that one. Well, can I just ask, why are they not happy with that? Why do they have to take it all away, get the permission, to get the land, the whole of the land, in the new emerging plan, okay, and then all of a sudden go for free? I think it's wrong. I think we should refuse this one on the grounds that it's already got it for one. That's all they need. That's all they should do. If they want to build the one that's up there, then build it. They've got permission for it. But I think we should refuse this on the grounds of the whole situation. All of this has arisen. And it happened to be at a time when we had an old emerging plan, and then we've got an old local plan. Now we've got the new emerging plan. And it happens to be put in the new emerging plan. But it's only been put in for one dwelling, Not 3, not 4, not 5, not any amount. 1. Therefore, I believe we should just leave it for the 1 and refuse this at hand. Thank you.
Other speakers? Yes, Councillor Baker, I've seen. And then
Could you go back to the plan of the... That's it. That one. Thank you. With regard to that application, which was approved, was that obviously does not cover the whole of the present application site. So that has been approved, so I can understand why that little bit would end up in the emerging local plan, but I can't see why the rest of it. So what was the rationale behind including the whole area that's in the ownership of one person, I'm presuming, actually going into the emerging local plan? Does that make sense?
Yeah, just to answer that. So the red line that you're referring to on the 2015 permissions is the same. The application site is the same for this. So the red line was of the application site in 2015. Once that was approved, then it got put into the emerging local plan map. So that's why the red line covers that site now. So yeah, it was a generous plot size, but.
So what we're saying is then when that application for that fantastic underground house-looking thing was granted, the whole of the site was included in that application. Is that what we're saying?
Yes, that's correct.
Mm-hmm. So the whole of the site, and that is the right, Councillor Everett.
Are there any objections to that against the local plan allocation, please?
Yeah.
I'm unaware if there's any outstanding objections, but it is within the emerging local plan. That's all we know for sure.
Right. Councillor Cawthron, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Can you answer a question about the original approval of the 2015 house? I believe that was granted under delegated authority. Is it normal for a house or an application outside of the settlement boundary to be granted under delegated authority? I have other questions as well.
Yeah, just to confirm, so at that time the council was unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land of supply. So we had to treat every application on its own individual merits, and predominantly, according to national guidance, we have to assess it against the economic, social and environmental strands of sustainability, and it met all of those criteria. So yeah, it's not, that's quite standard given the situation we was in at that time.
Thank you. At the time of that 2015 application, there was certainly one objection, maybe possibly more. I didn't look into too much detail. But those objections were addressed by the agent, NBA Architects. And the architect agent said at this point that this was very much an application for one dwelling to be lived in by the applicant, and it wouldn't set a pattern for ribbon development. One of the complaints, Mr. Whedon, said, perhaps a foot in the door for a follow-up application for multiple properties. The council was assured this wouldn't be the case, it wouldn't be ribbon development. You said something which I'd like to ask what you meant by. You said it builds upon a strong pattern of development. But is that ribbon development, which we were assured wouldn't happen? Well, what do you mean by that, please?
Yeah, I guess just what I meant by that is that you've got an existing linear pattern of development that's running along Wivenhoe Road there, and it will just continue that. It will continue that pattern basically. So it's not going to look particularly out of place. That's what I meant in context of that.
It's ribbon development.
Yeah, I guess it could be described as that, yeah.
If I could just have one more. I think this house probably was only approved really because of its uniqueness. It's set in the middle of a plot. It seems to be almost a grass roofed. I don't know the details of the actual roofing. I could see how it would be approved. It's very different to the 5 which were turned down. The 3 are simply a variation on the 5. That's my observation. I'm quite concerned that the settlement boundary was extended solely because of this property. But this property wasn't, it was never built, and in effect it was we were missold. Well, not myself, but the previous members were missold. I'm not happy with this, and if it comes to it, I'll recommend that we reject this, please.
All right, further speakers. I've got Councillor Everett and then Councillor Holmes.
Sorry, I forgot what I was going to ask now. Move on.
Councillor Holmes, then.
So if this permission was given for that house there, anything else that comes out of there is backland development, isn't it? I mean, if that's what the permission was given to, then you can't add to that. They're asking for a complete different one, which would mean that the position of this being given means that anything else that's built on there is in the gardens. I just feel that there's something wrong with this particular piece of land. And I can't get that out of my head, I'm afraid. Go on, sorry.
Thanks. I think there's a couple of questions being raised about why the 1 was granted permission, and was it because of the particular credentials, if you like, of that house? I've just had a look. It doesn't seem to be the case. It was just assessed in terms of its landscape impact, the need for housing, etc. at the time, and it was recognised it was outside the village boundary. There's, as is always the case, there's nothing to stop somebody coming forward with a later application, even if planning permission exists on a piece of land. That's perfectly, within anybody's rights to do so. In this particular case, an application's been made for 3 dwellings, and the decision tonight is to assess whether that particular application is acceptable in its own rights, without, if you like, sort of comparison to anything that we might prefer or we might think is a better alternative. So hence the report before you is really assessing the history is relevant in terms of the principle of development has been established, but then the report turns to the actual impacts of the built form of the development that's before you. I wouldn't have described this as backland development. It's new development. Although the houses are well set back from the street frontage, they're not behind existing houses, which is the sort of normal definition of what might be thought of as backland.
Yeah, but I keep going, and I know you can laugh at me, you can do whatever you want with me, but there's something in my head that tells me this whole position is wrong. Because it's for one, it was given for one building. And one building with all that land is fine. But then, when they don't even build it, is it run out, that planning application?
No. February next year.
It runs out in February next year. So they've left it all this time before they apply for 3 houses. There's something wrong. It's not right. And planning needs to be backed right up somewhere if this is what people can do and get away with. Because there's something wrong with that planning application. I can't say anything else. I don't know anything else. But I feel that there's something wrong.
Councillor McWilliams.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wonder if the officer wouldn't mind just putting up the with the plan with the emerging red line, and just want to see what that looked like again. Yeah, so it's filled in that corner, and then you've got other around there. It's all right. I just wanted to see how that fitted in with it. Thank you.
Councillor Cawthorne again.
Just going back to Kath's observation that she didn't believe this was particularly approved because of some unique design features, to paraphrase.
that's really not the case. But the complete opposite case was made by the agent at the time. I'll read just a certain amount of it. We wish to outline that this application is not for a single-storey eco-home, that's quoting one of the objectors, as suggested by the objector. The application is for a well-considered, single-storey, low-impact, sustainable dwelling following assessment of the immediate and wider context to arrive at a solution which is unique and appropriate to the site. It seeks a high-quality piece of architecture which will respond to the site, not harm it. The proposal in both its siting and design obviously should say does, not in any way enforce the current building line. My observation is that the three will completely enforce the current building line. To continue with the agent, indeed, the distinctiveness of the design effectively creates a strong endpoint to the extents of a rural settlement. Therefore, it does not set a precedent for future development in a ribbon effect. And I think that was clear that whoever approved this must have taken that on board. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, just to clarify, I don't dispute that that's the supporting information that the applicant submitted with their plan. What I said was that when the application was determined, that issue wasn't given particular weight. So if you look at the officer's report, the principle of development was established, if you like, looking at the three strands of sustainability in the MPPF, because we didn't have a 5-year housing land supply at that time. Significant weight wasn't given to the issues that you've described in terms of weighing up whether in principle development was acceptable.
Councillor Everett.
Thank you. This troubles me. It troubles me because we are the planning authority. We as councillors have this in front of us for a very good reason tonight, and that is very specific because we have to be seen to be making not only the correct decision, but we need to be seen to be making the correct decision. Irrespective of the rights and wrongs or implications or suggestions, whatever those might or might not be, we need to be seen to be being fair on this. And that is what troubles me, because there are implications with what has been said by members of the public and, in fact, around this table tonight. So I find it very troubling that we're at this stage now and where clearly there's a lot of unease around this room now as to what we can and cannot do. I'm not sure I have any easy answer for that, but I'd like to put on record my unease about the situation and that we need, whatever we do, to be absolutely squeaky clean and be seen to be squeaky clean on it.
Right. Councillor Holmes.
I'm still going to say this, and I mean this sincerely. It was given for one house, and it was given a very, very large amount of ground. It certainly doesn't mean that they can come back. They can come back and ask for more, but as far as we're concerned, well, as far as I'm concerned, we should just refuse this application because it's not fair on any type of planning.
Yes, please.
I think perhaps I can empathise with Councillor Holmes' sense of unease in that it is perhaps a slightly unusual one. Planning permission was granted for one, and that triggered, if you like, the redrawing of the settlement boundary because that came soon afterwards on an unusually large site for one dwelling. We've been consistent across the district where planning permissions have been granted prior to the emerging plan settlement boundaries being redrawn. They do reflect extant planning permissions at the time those boundaries are drawn, but this is perhaps unusual because it is a large site for one. So I think you're kind of wrestling with the difference between the history is for one, but the site boundary that's been redrawn is a large enough site for more than one.
That's not the point, is it?
Well, I think that's where where the difference comes between what you might feel comfortable with, one, because that's got planning permission, and the 3 that have been applied for, because it is a large site. But I think you need to focus on what harm would 3 cause, if you feel it would, if you think there's a problem with 3.
No, I don't think...
Sorry, all right, sorry,
can
John.
I return?
I'll give you a comeback if you want,
Yeah.
and then I'm going to ask the solicitor to speak.
Okay, I don't think that 3 is any detriment to the site. I just think that it's wrong that this particular site should have been put in for 1, and now because it's all different timelines and everything else, they've got the perfect opportunity to go against everything that anybody ever says here. And today we've been up on twice on this particular idea. One of them's not going to be discussed tonight, which I'm a bit upset about, because I would be the same adamant on that one as I am on this one. We make these decisions, or the committee, not us, whoever was there, whatever. We make these decisions, and then everything gets thrown up in the air, and we have to come and make them again, but with extra, properties. And that's the specific wrongness of this, was that it was put in the emerging plan for a 1 dwelling. Because it was in there, now they've gone, let's take 3. I'm surprised they haven't gone for 6 or 7. But they got refused 5, so maybe they're taking it easy. But they should stick to the 1. They shouldn't have even... Morally, they shouldn't have put this one in. Morally. And I know moral's got nothing to do with anybody, right? But this should have been kept at the one that they got the application for, and that should never have been put in to the emerging plan.
Right, can I ask Charlotte to do something?
No, it's just picking up from what Kath said, really. She sort of stole my line. It's you just need to look at what harm you think this site might be causing. So you sounded as though 3 might be overdevelopment. You need to look at the material planning considerations. Otherwise, you shouldn't be voting or making motions on this application. So if you think there's overdevelopment, if you think it is too much to have 3 on there because of the location and because of the other types of development, then that is a material planning consideration. The planners might suggest it isn't overdevelopment, but that is a material planning consideration. So you just need...
Right, let's...
You need to bring it back to just looking at this application on its individual merits. And although the planning history is confusing, Kath's outlined that in quite a bit of detail. So if we're looking to refuse or approve, whatever we're doing, we need to bring it back to the details of this. Otherwise, I think we're in danger of getting a decision without the proper reasons explained. And then you risk similar things to what's happened before, where there's been suggestions that things have been missed out of decision notices, and so we just need to outline where we're at, if we could, please.
Councillor Baker.
I sympathise with you, Councillor Holmes. The refusal was on the grounds that it would represent a significant extension of ribbon development located outside of any defined settlement limit. The emerging local plan has yet to be examined, so the inspector could quite easily turn around and say, you're not having that bit in it, which would mean, therefore, that this site would be outside of the defined settlement boundary, which it still is, if you look back to 2007. So I don't see what the difference is between the 5 and the 3 on that basis, that they are still outside any defined settlement limit, just because we've put it in for the 1, but that's not yet agreed. So where do we stand? You see where I'm coming from with this? Where do we stand with that, please?
Yeah.
Okay, in terms of the weight to be given to the emerging plan, it can't be given significant weight because it hasn't yet been examined, as you said. The amount of weight will be partly dependent on the number of outstanding objections to the particular proposal, and I'm afraid I don't know how many there are in this case. But I think we should bear in mind that the published draft of the plan is clearly the council's published draft, its published wish, if you like, in terms of the plan going forward. So it has been considered. Full council have voted on the plan that was submitted to government to be examined. And so there's sort of no doubt, if you like, that this represents what the council wanted to see at that point in time. But I think if an inspector were looking at it, he may well say, I can only give, I can't give full weight to the emerging plan because it hasn't yet been examined. I think in your comments you picked up a difference in terms of built form, didn't you, between one that was given permission that was sort of single story of a particular design and 3 you said was quite similar to 5 and it was more like the ribbon development that had been dismissed on appeal. So, those differences in impact on the form of development and the form of the village are potential, material considerations, aren't they, those design issues?
Right. Councillor Everett?
With that in mind, if we were minded to refuse against the 2007 plan as being outside of the boundary, bringing into account the new emerging local plan not having enough weight to outweigh that, would that be a sustainable route to refusal?
I think any refusal would have to acknowledge the history of the site. That's really material, the fact that the principle has been established for a dwelling on that site. So you'd need to identify why this application was significantly different to the permission that exists.
I suppose you could say. No speakers? Right.
Thank you, Chair. If there's no one else wishing to comment, I'd like to recommend refusal. Under policy SPL 3 in the draft local plan, section D. I don't think the application meets this condition, where the application is supposed to, it states here, the design and layout of a development maintains or enhances important existing site features of landscape, ecological heritage or amenity value. I don't think it meets any of those. And you could argue that that's not sufficient, but I would like it to either be rejected or go to an inspector for a decision. I think he's got enough here that, to work with. I don't think we're in a position to make a decision, and I'd be happy to let the inspector decide. Or for the applicant, of course, to break ground in January and build a fantastic house.
Well, I have a proposer. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Right. Any further discussions on it? Well, you'll want to know, as the officers are recommending acceptance, on the points that Councillor Cawthron has said, that SG, he quoted a clause, SG...
Sorry, it was... Well, as a starting point, just to get the ball rolling, it's SPL 3 Part A-D, which is a design. But I'm sure other councillors, other members will have other reasons.
Yeah.
Forgive me for asking, but can I just query, when Councillor Cawthron is saying SPL 3, in our documents here, that's coming under the local plan for 2013 to 2033. Is there still an... Yeah. But we've been talking about 2007 as well, so am I getting confused? I'm sorry.
Yes.
You're not, and I think I can help. I'll try and put it into words what I was saying before. That substantially it goes against QL1 of the 2007 plan, because it doesn't then come under whatever the new corresponding one is in the new local plan, because that only has limited weight. What is that? I can't remember what it's called. Replacement for QL1. So it's about the fact that under the old plan, it's outside the settlement boundary, and we don't feel that it is inside the new plan's settlement boundary because the new plan doesn't have enough weight.
Well, I'm going to ask for speakers, but I'm going to put my own two penneth in. I'm afraid I don't agree with everything that's been said so far, because there is an outstanding permission with that size piece of land in it, and if that has been converted into whether it's converted or not to the local plan, it's an outstanding one which shows that as the boundary of the land. And I think if that goes to appeal, the inspector will stick with that ruling.
I think too, unfortunately.
But, right, Councillor Cawthron, I'm going to let you come back if you wish.
I was just going to ask whether this is for the officers. Sorry. Sorry, I was just going to ask whether it's for the officer or for the solicitor. Can we object under both, as Councillor Everett was suggesting, both the a policy under the adopted plan and a policy under the draft plan?
Right, please go.
Yes, thanks for asking that question. I think it would be very worthwhile to refer back to the 2007 policies as well. So that's QL 9 and 11 in terms of design and environmental impact. I think the issue about it being outside the settlement boundary in the 2007 and not yet accepting the more up-to-date plan might be a more difficult argument to run, given that it has an extant permission on it. I think my advice would be to focus on the design issues and the environmental impact, because I think the council's accepted the principle of development on that piece of land.
Thank you.
Right. So we're happy with all the points of objecting. Then I'll put it to the vote, and it's Councillor Cawthron, I think, has proposed refusal, and Councillor Hones has seconded it. Those in favour of refusing it, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And those against, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that it? Yeah. Yep. In that case, it. Oh, I should have asked. Yes. 2 abstentions. On the strength of that, it's 5-4. It is refused. Right. No, I thought. Right, councillors, let us move on. Clacton Town Hall, it's planning application 18/14898, I beg your pardon, because it's a listed building and because it's owned to TDC, it's in front of us this evening. And Alison gets
Thank you. Yes, this is before us because TDC are the applicants and it's purely a listed building consent, so there's no planning issues, you're just considering the impact on the historic fabric of the listed building. We all obviously know the town hall. The vast majority of the works are internal changes. Everything is internal. It's to facilitate the office transformation project. So the majority is removing modern partitions, removing a modern ceiling to the chamber, which will result in a big improvement. There's some widening of doorways, which results in a small loss of fabric, but on balance, there's no harm. These are all modern partitions to create open plan offices. And then some of the existing doorways into the individual offices will be boxed up internally, so the doors will remain on the outside, but they'll just create single, larger offices. This is the lovely suspended ceiling at the moment in the committee room, which would be removed, and the nice ceiling underneath with all the original detailing would be exposed, so that's a vast improvement. All the works carry out all the cornicing is reinstated to all the opened up doorways. As you can see here, it's just to create larger shared rooms so that each department has got basically open plan offices, and it's all modern partitions to come out. And there's some floor raising, but there will be suspended floors on the existing floor just for disabled access. And this shows you in the turret rooms the widening of the doors. And the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Speakers, I have Councillor Bennison.
Oh, you put your hand up, so I put you down. Sorry, I thought you were very enthusiastic.
Thank you, Chairman. You mentioned disabled access. Will there be disabled access to the upper storeys?
It's not included in this application. I don't think there will be, because it would take too much alterations. It's a listed building. So there's access at the ground floor level, and there's improved disabled toilets at ground floor level, but there's no lift proposal.
It's an interesting point. If you go and see a show at the town hall, you can only sit in the stalls. Yes. You can't sit in the tiered seats. Right, I think Councillor Everett indicated.
Thank you. In the pictures above the suspended ceiling, there were a whole load of pipes and things. Presumably, are those going to be left and open to show, or are they going to somehow be hidden away?
There's no detail in the application, so they wouldn't be on show. I assume that they're redundant.
We hope so.
The detail of the works is listed at 6.3 in the report. Yeah, so sections of service pipework and ductwork, along with the modern partitions, to be they'd be removed within that original chamber.
Councillor Baker.
I propose we accept the recommendation to approve, because we need to get it all done so that we can sit.
I've got a swarm of seconders, so I don't know what the collective noun is for a swarm of seconders, but we'll shove Councillor McWilliams down, I think. Yes. Right. I'm taking it as Councillor McWilliams is the seconder and Councillor Baker is the mover? Right. Okay. Those in favour, please show. Yeah. And there's no need to ask for those against, so, right.
Sorry, cross that back.
Right.
Thank you very much. There's another one, is there? This one. It's my one. Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah. Right, we move on to the last one, councillors. It's A7, it's 18/1318, another listed building, this one 13 Angel Gate, Wellington Road, Harwich.
Thank you, Chairman. Yep, as you say, it's 13 Angel Gate, which is in Wellington Road in Harwich. It's a Grade 2 listed building, built in 1858. And it's before members simply because TDC are the applicant. Specific works involved are under paragraph 6.3 of your report. However, all the works are in relation to a wider project to address dampness and condensation concerns within the property, which would involve a replacement kitchen, replacement bathroom and a new heating system. So here you can see the site location plan. There you go. It's the site at the end of the street there, and it's in quite an urban area. The pub just to the north there. Here's a few photographs of the site. So this is it in the rear elevation, the one on the end there. That's the side and rear elevations, and just the side elevation and the front elevation. There's a proposal of the roof tiles. And the next couple of slides just show the example of the sort of damp-related issues that the property is currently suffering with. So, similar to the one at the town hall, it's a listed building consent application, so we're just assessing the impact of the historic building as opposed to the sort of normal planning applications that we deal with. So there'll be a number of minor changes to the building. External alterations, however, are either replacement work, such as like-for-like front and rear doors, or repair work, such as the repointing of the chimney stack and replacement slate tile. The 2 new extraction fans and covers do not necessarily enhance the building, but are minor additions that can easily be reversed if necessary. Other work, such as an overhaul of the rear elevation sash windows, are like-for-like. In terms of the internal alterations, the replacement flooring will see ground levels slightly reduced 100mm to allow for insulation provision. This will see ground levels revert to their original size, whilst it's noted the existing floor is predominantly concrete and of no historic merit. So in summary, the impact of the proposed works will be minor and beneficial and will assist in the long-term preservation of the Grade 2 listed building. Therefore, it accords with local and national policies and recommended for approval. Thank you.
Right. Speakers? Councillor McWilliams.
Just wanted to say how interesting it was, because I've only ever seen the back end of those properties, and to actually see that inside, I think they're amazing, and I appreciate the fact that work is needed to be done on it. I didn't realise, I think Barry said the walls were 18 inches thick, didn't he? Which is really amazing. But I have nothing more to say than that, we need to get on with it, I believe, and I would like to recommend approval.
Councillor Hones got in and beat. I'll take a speech by Councillor Everett, but...
Thanks. It's just a request, really. I know when I put these things in myself with air vents, they usually have a louvered front about that sort of size in brown or white, which would look particularly horrible. Can we find something that looks a bit nicer and more in character with the age of the building than just the standard brown and white louvered front to an air extraction unit? It is possible to buy all sorts of clever fascias to go over them in wrought iron, in all sorts of things. So can we at least try and do something like that to make it look a bit more like the sort of building should have?
The point that was made this morning is this is really the test case, and depending on what they find here, they might need to go around the complete building. So it's right that we get this one right to start with. Yeah. So, proposer, Councillor McWilliams, seconder, John Hones, and further speaker?
It was just one thing. I'm not sure if Richard's forgotten to mention the bats that he was talking about this morning that are possibly in the roof void. Did that need to be in the...
There's no evidence that there is, but equally it's highly likely that there will be. Can we leave it in...
the capable hands of Tendring.
Hands of our officers that if there is any evidence of bats in the roof, that appropriate care is taken.
Right, with that...
There must be a condition. There must be a condition.
Mitigating circumstances if they find them.
Unlikely event, blah, blah. Yeah, because it's the law anyway, so if you kill a bat, then, I mean, you're down there with bats,
Right. Yeah. Okay, now you're voting on it. Those in favour, please show. Right, that is unanimous, that is approved. That completes our agenda tonight. Thank you all very much. Thank the officers very much.